But with the way that both sides have reacted, this is kind of impossible to separate the truth from the myths, the facts from the fictions, and the shit from the chocolate. But if the nation that we live in today is indeed part of Thatcher's legacy, then frankly her legacy is f***ing mental.
And you cannot deny that she also inspired great adoration as well as condemnation during her life and career, Andy. Ex-French President Francois Mitterrand once said, "She has the eyes of Caligula and the mouth of Marilyn Monroe," which might be one of the creepiest sentences spoken about anyone ever, Andy. I know he was French, Andy, but that sentence proves that there is such a thing as being too French. I mean, in her defence, how the f*** was she supposed to respond to that at the time, Andy? Yes, thank you, Francois. Now, why don't you cool your jets a second, mon petit chou-fleur, and take it down at least a couple of notches? While I was in Australia, Andy, their Foreign Minister, Bob Carr, made headlines after describing some comments that Thatcher had made to him in her retirement as unabashedly racist. And as I mentioned at the start, you know that must have been spectacular, as it came from an Australian. Praise from Caesar is praise indeed. He claims that during a conversation she had warned Australia against Asian immigration, arguing that if they allow too much of it, they'd see the natives of the land, the European settlers, overtaken by migrants. For a start, Andy, I don't think you could accurately describe the European settlers as the natives of the land in Australia. I don't think even Australians would claim that.
That is taking the finders keepers rule a little bit too far.
Yeah. Bob Carr went on to say that he was particularly astonished at the comments because she made them while his Malaysian-born wife, Helena, was standing not far away, but was fortunately out of earshot. He said, "I was so astonished, I don't think I could come up with an appropriate reply." And if in doubt, Andy, you always go with "shut the up." And I don't know why that stuck in his throat. I've never known an Australian person be too far away from that particular phrase. So it's going to be interesting to see how Britain manages to cater to a divided nation over the issue of Thatcher's legacy this week and beyond. Perhaps the easiest thing to do might be to have one single eulogy, extolling the virtues of her as a person and her time in office, but have it read twice. Once sincerely and once sarcastically. That might be the only real way of satisfying everyone. Or you could just use carefully crafted euphemisms. That used to be the favoured technique in obituaries. There was a great interview this week with Bob Choundy, I think his name is, who used to be the obituaries editor at the BBC, and he said that there used to be a tradition in obits of never ever speaking ill of the dead, and that went by the wayside in the 1980s. I wonder what could have happened during that decade to facilitate that societal decline, Andy. Maybe it was something to do with society being told that it didn't exist and having a truncheon slammed into its balls. But he said it's gone out of fashion a bit now, but euphemisms used to be an obituary tool to soften the blow. The Telegraph in particular became famous for them. A crashing bore was a tireless raconteur. An old windbag relished the cadences of the English language, he said. So, with that in mind, I'll present a euphemistic eulogy of the great Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher was a steely figure whose time in office was unshackled by compassion. She demonstrated an uncanny knack of multitasking opinions, having a fiery commitment to thrift, while simultaneously unleashing the undiluted nuclear power of casino capitalism. Her diamond-cut voice could charm a tumour out of a rhino, and she possessed an icy focus that well complemented the general temperature of her heart. Her love and respect for the common man was poorly documented, and she will forever arouse powerful memories in the minds of all those who experienced her essence. Plus, lest we forget, she had the eyes of Caligula and the mouth of Marilyn Monroe. Oh yeah! Oh no! Oh yeah! Oh no!
Well, there's a great argument over her legacy. She was being trumpeted as a champion of freedom. Some of the Chileans might disagree on that after her support for General Pinochet, in her defence, apparently the people that his regime murdered didn't feel as much pain as the victims of other dictators, so it was fine. And besides, has Britain been invaded by Chile in the last 25 years?
That's
no,
right.
That is all the justification I need, John.
Judge the record, Andy.
Yes, she unquestionably left a legacy, John, but to many it was the kind of legacy that your dog leaves when you take it to Legosize in the park. But what Britain did she leave behind? Well, John, I think it's a Britain that's realised that in business anything is possible, but unfortunately it was also a Britain that realised that in business anything is possible. And the unregulated markets have proceeded since then to defecate noisily through our national letterbox ever since. At first, perhaps we were excited just to have some exciting new bits of post, but now we just have a house full of shit. Since Thatcher's time, the United Kingdom has been sort of fracturing off, devoluting in all different kinds of directions. Scotland spinning perhaps towards independence. After the decade of Thatcherism in which large parts of the United Kingdom were essentially used as something like a cross between a urinal and a laboratory monkey. Perhaps even a laboratory monkey in a urinal. We're now left with an economy based on vapour and on financial witchcraft. And the whole impression is that the management of Britain's transition away from the industrial was managed with the same delicacy as Anne Boleyn's transition to becoming the former Mrs. Henry VIII.